guys, this is Jana S. Brown coming to you from the Plot Geeks, and today we're doing another The More You Know. We're going to talk about characters. We've been talking a little bit about different parts of plot and books and all that kind of stuff. We're going to keep going along those lines. We might jump around a little bit, but we'll get there when we get there. Anyway, today we're going to talk about main characters versus secondary characters versus tertiary characters, which we also call spear bearers. So we'll start with the third one because it's the easiest one. A tertiary character in a novel, this is generally going to be in a fiction novel, is a character whose job is just to kind of help set up the scene. They add life to the world. They make the world look well-rounded. Back in the times when we were doing plays, this is why we call them spear carriers. My hat's crooked. I hate it when my head is crooked. Anyway, the reason we call them this is that in plays, these were characters that generally didn't have a name or a speaking part, but they would be things like the guards that stand on either side of the castle door and hold spears. So we call them spear bearers or tertiary characters or unnamed characters. They are part of setting up the setting, creating the tone and the background for your book, but they generally don't have much else to do. They are important because that does make for a well-rounded universe when you've got those extra characters in them. So it is important, but they're not going to have a speaking part. We don't care about their arcs. Whatever the fishmonger is doing in his spare time is none of our business. So that's a tertiary character. Then we're going to jump to the top one, and we're going to talk about main characters. This should be a review for most people, but the main character, often called the protagonist, is the person who it's their story. This is the person who the story is about. They are undergoing the most change, and it can be a positive arc or a negative arc, but they're the ones that are undergoing the most change. Their actions most affect the plot and affect the other characters. They're the one that everything centers around. You can have books that have multiple main characters. This happens a lot in romance, where you'll have your love interest 1 and love interest 2, and they'll be very evenly matched. They're both going to change the same. Both of their actions affect the plot and affect each other and affect the other characters. In things like epic fantasy, you might have multiples. You can have a whole ensemble cast where you might have 6 or 8 really main viewpoint, their actions change everything kinds of characters. So you get that happening. And that's what's important about the main character, is it's their story. And other people can be important. This is getting into our secondary characters, but even as important as they are, it's still not their story. So one of my favorite examples is Star Wars, just the middle 3. Let's talk about just the middle 3. It's really Luke's story. It's his arc. It's his call to adventure. It's his progression as a Jedi, all of those things. And while people like Han Solo and Leia are very, very important, it's still not their story. They are not the ones who are changing the most. They are not the ones going through the biggest arc. They are not the ones who everything they do affects the plot and affects the characters around them. It doesn't mean they're not important, but it's still not their story. Luke is the main character. So that's what a main character does. Okay. They're often called the protagonist. They're the ones that are going to get into trouble. They're going to run into conflicts, and therefore we're going to have stories. A secondary character are these characters that they're more important than the tertiary. They tend to be named. They have speaking parts. They have goals. They have arcs. They have things that they're doing. They are important to moving the plot along, but they're moving it along, alongside and in harmony with, or against, in the case of antagonists and secondary villains, against the protagonist. They're the ones that flesh out everything else around that main character. So they're important. They should have an arc. They should grow and change, and they fulfill a lot of roles. They can be a mirror. They can be information. They can bring humor. They can do all sorts of things. But secondary characters are very important, but it's still not their story. And if you are writing a book and you get to the end and you go, gosh, the secondary character is more interesting than the main character, you might have been telling the wrong person's story. And that's okay. You just look at it and go, well, how am I going to fix that? Either you need to go in and give your main character more things to do. You need to make it more their story. Or you need to go in there and say, see, I've got a glare too. Wow, we've got all sorts of things going on today. Anyway, so you either need to change the story so that you're telling somebody else's story and you let it be their story, or you need to say, all right, secondary character, you've got to back off. So let's give the main character more things to do. Let's give him more responsibility. Let's make sure that the plot is shifting around based on what's going on with the main character, not with the secondary characters. And remember that a main character and a secondary character, that doesn't have to be the case for multiple books. If you're doing a tight dynamic series, it tends to be. So, like Harry Potter will always be the hero through all 7 books of that Harry Potter series. But you also get a lot of different kinds of series, things like anthology series, where you might, and you see this in romance a lot, where book 1 may introduce an entire family. Say it's a family of ranchers with 5 brothers, because this is a common thing that we see in cowboy romances. Cowboy romances where it's the entire family, and then we're going to read the series, and each book is going to be one of the brothers and their romantic interest, and then the next one, and next one. So in that case, they're secondary characters in each other's books, but they are the main character in their own book. That happens frequently. You can do the same thing across worlds. Terry Pratchett is amazing at this. He has the Discworld. It's 40 some odd books, and there are sets that are about certain characters. So there's the witches books, and in those, the witches are all main characters. But they may appear in the wizard books, and there they will be secondary characters or cameos, because it's not their story. They're now just supporting it. So you always want to look for that. Whose story is it, and who is the supporting cast? And that's how you tell the difference between main characters, secondary characters, and tertiary characters. All really, really important. You want them there. They will help to bring your books to life, because a single character standing against a white background is really, really boring. But you do need to know the difference. And when you find that, you're getting imbalanced, you may have to change what story you're telling, or you may have to tell your secondary characters to wait and be interested in their very own book, and to tone it down a little bit so that your main character can still be the person in charge. So there you go. Until next time, I'm Jana S. Brown with Plot Geeks. Bye-bye now.